Welcome! Enjoy this mind-empowering story. Be sure to watch till the end. Long before the rise of kings and the clash of armies, there was a woman whose voice carried the weight of heaven itself. Her name was Deborah, prophetess, judge, mother of Israel, and one of the most extraordinary leaders in all of human history. Hers is a story of courage wrapped in wisdom, of faith that dared to move when everyone else stood frozen in fear. She lived in a time when the world measured power by swords and chariots, yet she wielded something far more powerful than either: clarity of purpose, unshakable conviction, and a courage that never bent under the pressure of impossible odds. In an era that offered women almost no public platform, Deborah stood at the center of an entire nation's destiny. The land in darkness. Israel had fallen into a pattern of forgetting. Time and again, the people would turn from their covenant with God, and time and again, suffering would follow. By the time Deborah emerged onto the stage of history, Israel had been living under cruel oppression for 20 long, grinding years. The source of their misery was Jabin, a powerful Canaanite king who ruled from the city of Hazor, and his brutal military commander, a man named Sisera. Sisera commanded a fearsome army equipped with 900 iron chariots that tore across the fertile plains, leaving villages shattered and families broken in their wake. The roads of Israel fell silent. Travelers dared not walk openly. Farmers abandoned their fields. Communities huddled behind closed doors, too afraid to resist and too wounded to hope. Into this darkness, Deborah sat beneath a palm tree in the hill country of Ephraim. People came to her from every direction, bringing disputes, seeking wisdom, asking for direction. She listened with patience. She discerned with precision. She judged with justice. And unlike so many leaders before her, she heard the voice of God clearly, and she was not afraid to speak what she heard, even when what she heard demanded immediate, courageous action. A woman who dared to send, one day, Deborah summoned a man named Barak, son of Abinoam. She delivered a word straight from God. He was to gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun and march against Sisera at the Kishon River. God had promised to draw out the enemy and deliver them into Israel's hands. It was a divine mandate, a direct call to battle. Barak hesitated. He looked at Sisera's iron chariots. He counted the cost, and then he said something that would define his legacy. He would only go if Deborah went with him. This was not simply the response of a fearful man. It was the response of someone who understood that Deborah's presence represented something no army could provide: the living assurance of God's direction. He wanted that assurance walking beside him through the valley. Deborah agreed to go, but she spoke a prophetic word that would echo through generations. The honor for the victory would not go to Barak. It would go to a woman. Many assumed Deborah herself was that woman. They were wrong, but they would not discover the truth until the battle was already won. The march to Mount Tabor together, Deborah and Barak assembled the troops. 10,000 men gathered on the slopes of Mount Tabor, looking down at the vast Jezreel Valley below. In that valley, Sisera moved his forces into position. Iron chariots gleaming in the sun, soldiers brimming with the confidence of a military force that had never known real defeat. By every human calculation, Israel had no chance of winning. Then Deborah spoke, not cautiously, not with a trembling voice, but with absolute ringing authority. She said, "Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" That single declaration broke the paralysis. Barak surged down the mountain with 10,000 men charging behind him. What happened next confounded every military expectation. The Kishon River flooded suddenly, turning the valley floor into thick, treacherous mud. Sisera's iron chariots became useless. Wheels buried deep, horses panicking, soldiers thrown into complete confusion. The very landscape became a weapon in Israel's favor. The mighty army collapsed. Soldiers fled in every direction. Sisera himself abandoned his legendary chariot and ran alone on foot. The final chapter. Jael, Sisera, breathless and desperate, stumbled upon a tent belonging to a woman named Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. Her husband had a treaty with King Jabin, so Sisera believed he had found a safe refuge. Jael came out to meet him and invited him inside. She gave him warm milk, covered him with a blanket, and promised to stand guard at the entrance. Exhausted beyond measure, Sisera fell into a deep sleep. What happened next stands as one of the most decisive moments in ancient history. Jael took a tent peg and a hammer and drove the peg through Sisera's temple, permanently ending the 20-year reign of terror over Israel. When Barak arrived in pursuit, it was Jael who stepped out to meet him and showed him that the prophecy had been fulfilled, exactly as Deborah had foretold. The honor had gone to a woman. Not the woman anyone expected, but a woman nonetheless. The Song of Deborah. After the victory, Deborah did not simply move on to the next challenge. She sang. The Song of Deborah, recorded in the 5th chapter of the Book of Judges, is considered one of the oldest surviving pieces of Hebrew poetry ever written. It is raw, vivid, triumphant, and deeply personal. She praised the warriors who answered the call with courage. She pointedly named those tribes who stayed home and did nothing. She honored Jael with some of the most powerful poetic lines in the entire Hebrew scriptures. And throughout the song, she celebrated not herself, but the God who had made every moment of that extraordinary victory possible. In a world where women were largely invisible in political and military records, Deborah's song preserves her voice completely, unfiltered, unedited, and unforgettable. It stands as both a hymn and a historical document, surviving thousands of years entirely intact. The legacy of a mother in Israel. Deborah called herself a mother in Israel. That phrase carried profound meaning far beyond a simple term of affection. It described a sacred role, one of protection, nourishment, intercession, and fierce advocacy on behalf of a people. A mother in Israel was someone who fought for her people, the way a mother fights for her children, without hesitation, without retreat, and without apology. For 40 years after that decisive battle, the land rested in peace. 40 years of farmers working their fields without fear. 40 years of travelers walking the open roads freely. 40 years of a nation breathing deeply, all made possible in part because a woman sat under a palm tree and refused to let silence and fear have the final word. Deborah's story is not simply a chapter extracted from ancient history. It is a living testimony that true leadership is not determined by gender, social standing, or military power. It is determined by the willingness to hear clearly, to speak truthfully, and to step forward faithfully when the critical moment demands it. She was not perfect. She was not superhuman. She was simply willing. And in God's economy, willingness has always been more than enough to change everything. Let us know how this story has impacted you.